All right, welcome to another episode of Sports for All. And today we have as our guest a man who has covered the only NFL team I know and I love, and he's covered the Niners for the last 26 years. So, Matt, welcome to the program.
All right, Vance, thank you so much for having me. And I don't look that old, do I? I mean, I look like I might have started covering this team when I was like 3 years old, but actually I'm not that young.
No, you don't look like somebody who's covered one of the greatest sports organizations in the world the last 26 years.
Yeah, I've experienced a lot in those 26 years, believe me. A lot of good years at the beginning, a lot of really bad years, some good years again, some bad years again. So it's just kind of been this roller coaster. But through it all, the thing that I think I've enjoyed the most is getting to meet people from around the globe like yourselves, people who follow the team. And so I've made a lot of new friends through all corners of the world through this job. So for that, I'm forever grateful.
And also with us, Matt, is my colleague and co-host, Brian Yalu.
Yeah, Brian, how you doing? It's good. We chatted a little bit before we went on the air. Brian, it's good to see you.
Yeah, hello, Matt. It's a pleasure. I really asked Vince, I wanted really to talk to you because I've been writing about the 49ers and I have a lot of questions for you.
All right. Well, I'm ready for you. Whatever questions you have, I'm ready.
All right.
Okay. Matt, well, first of all, I've followed the Niners since Joe Montana's early years, early in his career, and I remember the catch. I remember my goodness, all those losses to during the time of Steve Young, I would watch Niners games on cable early in the morning here. I would be 4 or 5 in the morning here, and all those losses.
So the 49ers would play a day game at Candlestick Park that starts at 1 o'clock here, and you have to get up early and watch it at 5 a.m.
Yes, 4 or 5.
And then would your whole day be like good or bad depending on if they won or lost?
If I would dread during Steve Young's time, I would dread whenever they would face the Packers or the Cowboys because they didn't have a not so good record against these teams. This was in the early 90s during the prime Brett Favre and who was the Troy Aikman, prime Troy Aikman. So it was their three-headed monster: Aikman, Smith, and Michael Irvin. So it wasn't I felt uneasy whenever they would play these teams because you had Brett Favre, you had Antonio Freeman, and their D line and O line. So it wasn't but I still watched, and some of those games were heartbreaking. My goodness.
Yeah.
And also I remember that game. I'm not sure if it was Caps last year where it was the NFC Championship against the Seahawks where I thought they should have ran the football and they came within inches of the end zone. I don't know if you remember that game.
Well, yeah. The NFC Championship is the one where actually it was late. It was pretty late in the game, so I don't think they really had any. They pretty much had to throw it. I think they just went to the wrong guy. They tried to go after Richard Sherman with Crabtree in the corner of the end zone there, and Sherman made one of the probably the best play of his career. A career that'll end up him going to the Hall of Fame. He made that great play, and Malcolm Smith ran over and made the interception in the end zone. And then, if you remember, Seahawks went on to the Super Bowl and absolutely destroyed the Denver Broncos. So basically that game in Seattle, truly one of the best games I've ever covered, just the energy and everything else in that stadium that game, there was no doubt. It was like a lot of those Cowboys 49er games that you mentioned, where you knew that the winner of that game was the best team in the league, because the second best team
Yes.
in the league was the loser of that game, not the Super Bowl team on the other conference.
And how is Trey Lance, Matt?
Well, it's funny you should ask, Vince, because I just got back when you and I were emailing. I was in Fargo, North Dakota, and I was also in Marshall, Minnesota. And so Trey went to North Dakota State University in Fargo. And so I spent about 4 days there talking to some of his coaches and some of the people around the football program in North Dakota State. We also went to his hometown in Southwest Minnesota, Marshall, town of about 13,000, and spent a lot of time with his parents and some of his friends and some of his coaches there. And, I can tell you that right now, the 49ers, everything that they felt about him when they drafted him with the number 3 overall pick, and now that they've had him in the building for about a month, a little bit more than a month, they feel like, hey, this is our guy. Everything we thought about him has been reaffirmed. So yeah, they feel good. And how quickly he can get out there and perform and contribute, that remains to be seen. But Trey Lance is doing well, and I spent some time with him. It's actually been more than a year, not since February of 2020 that I've had an opportunity to even speak to these players face to face. But I was able to do that with Trey when I was there in Fargo. Met up with him at a charity softball game, and we spent some time together. So I like the kid. I think everybody likes him. We all know he's talented. We all know he's smart. Now it's just a matter of he can learn the professional game and put it to use out there on the field. But everybody likes Trey Lance, that's for sure. Everybody I met, there's a very high opinion of him from all those people who've coached him and gotten to know him through the years.
Okay, you have this forthcoming season, you have the defending champs in the same conference. How does this, in your opinion, how does this year's Niners stack up against the champs, who have practically all their starters back from last season?
Well, the champs from last year are an older team. They're riding behind a 43-year-old quarterback, and at some point Tom Brady's going to slow down. Rob Gronkowski is back for another year. He's not the same player he used to be, and heck, Tom Brady isn't the same player he used to be. If you look at what Tampa Bay did during the regular season last year, they weren't, they were a playoff team, don't get me wrong, but it wasn't like that they were the team from start to finish that was just the best team. Frankly, in the NFC Championship game, I think Brady threw 3 interceptions. And for a lot of the season, I think you could almost say, can the quarterback still do it? And, it wasn't until the Super Bowl where he did it. And yes. So I don't think that the 49ers have reason to be fearing the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They don't play them during the regular season. The 49ers really have to kind of focus in on the teams that they're going to be playing in the regular season. And really, to me, it all starts in the NFC West. Right now, you have the 49ers, you have the Arizona Cardinals, you have the Los Angeles Rams, and of course the Seattle Seahawks. Those teams, all 4 of those teams, and I don't know that I've ever covered a time in this league when there have been 4 teams in the division, and certainly not 4 teams in the NFC West, where you could make a legitimate argument that they could win the Super Bowl. And I think that that's where each of these teams are right now, is that all of their fan base and their coaches and their players for all 4 of those teams have to go into this season thinking, you know what, we can be the best team in the league. So I really think it all begins there with the 49ers. They have to take care of business, or each of these teams feel like they have to take care of business when they match up against those three other teams in the division. So I really think that that's where, from the 49ers standpoint, the competition begins and ends. And then, two or three of those teams will go on to the playoffs, and then it's a brand new season, and teams change. The makeup of teams and how they look change completely based on injuries and just how the season goes. But I think that's where it starts with the 49ers. Instead of looking at Tampa Bay or some other teams, they have to look at Arizona, the Rams, and the Seahawks.
Okay, before I turn you over to Brian, two questions. Would you say the NFC West is the division of death? And how are negotiations with Richard Sherman?
Yeah, I would say that the NFC West is definitely the division of death. Yeah, it is. It's going to be a battle, and I don't know that this has ever happened, but it wouldn't surprise me at all if every team in that division is above 500. This year there's 17 games, so it wouldn't surprise me if each of those teams wins, 9+ games this season. And it also wouldn't surprise me if any team, or all the teams, I should say, go 3-3 within the division. And any team that pulls off 2 victories against the same division opponent has to feel extremely lucky. So, yeah, I think it's going to be a tough division. And as far as Richard Sherman, there are no contract negotiations at this point.
Okay.
I think, the 49ers have their team that they feel good with, and Richard Sherman cannot get a contract offer at this point where he feels like it's something that he deserves. I'm sure he has some opportunities to sign, but it's not at the kind of contract that he feels like he deserves and that he's willing to play for at this point. What he's holding out on is that, there will be some injuries at some point, and, some team will come calling, or some team that's decided to go with younger players. They get into training camp and they figure out that, these guys aren't very good. We need to get it better there. And so that's what Richard Sherman is waiting for at this point, is that, no team has kind of blown him away with a great contract offer. He's waiting for the best opportunity, and he's showing some patience. Remember now, Richard Sherman is not only Richard Sherman the player, he's also Richard Sherman the agent, and he negotiates his own contract. So he's showing a lot of patience and just waiting for what he believes is the perfect opportunity, because right now that perfect opportunity has not presented itself to him.
All right, Brian?
All right. So you were mentioning earlier about Trey Lance. Were you surprised that he was taken over? I've been hearing about Mac Jones before.
Yeah, I mean, I fully expected it, or I shouldn't say fully expected. I don't think I would have been surprised either way. It was just that everything I've been hearing was pointing toward Mac Jones, and I wasn't alone. There were a lot of people here, very well plugged in national reporters with ties to Kyle Shanahan, with ties to Mike Shanahan, who all thought it was going to be Mac Jones. And I felt like Trey Lance would have been the best pick for that, but my prediction all along from early on was that it was going to be Mac Jones. And I do believe that Mac Jones and his family and his camp fully expected it to be him. But the 49ers kept people guessing. They kept everybody guessing, including Trey Lance. I mean, Trey Lance did not think that he was going to be the guy until the phone rang there on draft night with about 3 or 4 minutes left on the 49ers clock. They have a 10-minute clock to make that pick, and they didn't make that phone call to Trey Lance until at least halfway through that time. And he was surprised because he didn't know it was going to be him. And, the 49ers kept a secret, and, good for them to do that because they really brought a lot of drama to that draft night. But hey, I'll be honest with you. My prediction was that they'd pick Mac Jones, but my gut told me they should pick Trey Lance. For a lot of the reasons I outlined, is that he's smart, he's young, he's malleable. They can kind of mold him how they want, because he hasn't played much football in the past year and a half. When he plays during the preseason, that'll be his first game in a year and a half. And so that's not great, because you want a quarterback who's gaining experience, but it's also not bad from the sense of there are no bad habits. They can kind of shape him the way they want to, and they still have Jimmy Garoppolo there, and they're fine. If Garoppolo is clearly the better guy and gives them the best chance of winning, they're fine just kind of working with Trey Lance behind the scene, maybe giving him a play here and there to use his running ability. But I think they did a good job of kind of keeping everybody guessing. I'm not sure what they gained from that, but that was really where the draft started. Everybody knew the Jets were taking Trevor Lawrence. Everybody knew the Jaguars were taking Trevor Lawrence. Everybody knew the Jets were taking Zach Wilson. And so draft night, the real drama began with that number 3 pick, and the 49ers surprised a lot of people, Trey Lance included, by taking him.
Being surprised, we're surprised to see Mac Jones go all the way down.
Yes, not. I don't think, not really. I still thought that he might go before Justin Fields, the Ohio State quarterback, but the Bears went up and got him. I do think that if the 49ers had not traded up to number 3, that Mac Jones might have gone earlier, because I think that teams like the Broncos might have wanted Mac Jones over any of those quarterbacks, and they might have stayed in that spot and not gotten Teddy Bridgewater. So I think by the 49ers going up to 3, it might have shuffled some things around. But that'll be one of the really interesting things about this year's draft, the draft, and then just how this year plays out and how their careers play out, is because you have 5 quarterbacks taken in the top 15 picks. And so let's just see, and not all those 5 are end up going to be good draft picks, right? I mean, it's just, for whatever reason, you have 5 quarterbacks taken in the top 15. There might be 1 or 2 superstars, there might be kind of an average player, and there might be a couple busts. And nobody can tell at this point, where these players are going to fit. So it'll be fun to watch that develop through the years.
You mentioned earlier Jim Garoppolo. What's your take on him? What's the latest on him? I've been hearing a lot of trade talk. There's talk that he's gonna go back to New England. What's your take on that?
Yeah, I think New England, I don't think they're going to be paying money. They're not going to want to trade for him and pay that $25 million contract, because they already have Cam Newton, who may or may not be the guy who holds on to that job. But they did select Mac Jones in the first round. So I don't know what happens to Garoppolo. My guess is that he remains with the 49ers this season, and then let's just let this thing play out and see how well he performs. And every year, right now, I don't think there's a real starting job out there for him. New England could be that spot, but they're not going to pay him $25 million to come in there and be the quarterback. My guess is that, so much can happen this season. But if Garoppolo plays well and the 49ers win a lot of football games and Trey Lance shows that he can be the guy for the future, then the 49ers will have an opportunity to trade him at the end of this season. And if he plays well, maybe he can hold off Trey Lance for another year. I don't know. That's the thing. It's really crazy, Brian. I mean, that's the thing that kind of makes this whole quarterback situation for the 49ers so fascinating, because they're devoting a heck of a lot of money and salary cap space to Jimmy Garoppolo, while also signaling to everybody, you, me, Vince, Garoppolo too, that he's not the guy for the future. it's going to be Trey Lance. It's just a matter of when they make that decision to go with Trey Lance over Jimmy Garoppolo. It could be at the start of this season, although that's kind of unlikely. It could be at some point during the season if Garoppolo struggles or the team starts losing some games. It could be at the end of the season. But if the 49ers go to the Super Bowl and win the Super Bowl, it's going to be really tough for them to make that decision and move on from Garoppolo in the offseason. So it's really one of the fascinating storylines in the NFL and one of the more interesting times in team history that I've ever seen.
Thank you, man. I'll save some for later. Vince, back to you.
Matt, how about situation on Julio Jones? Are the Niners going after him?
No, he's already been traded. The 49ers were interested, but they just couldn't come up. They just couldn't make that work. So he'll be going to the Tennessee Titans. But the 49ers, Kyle Shanahan loved Julio Jones. He's one of the top receivers in the league still, even though he had some injury issues last year. But Kyle Shanahan really likes him. But I think if they had gone after Julio Jones and gotten him, then they would have definitely had to trade Garoppolo because they wouldn't have been able to fit in Julio Jones's contract. But the one thing that Kyle Shanahan was really celebrating was because there were some rumors or some speculation that the Rams could get him, that the Cardinals could get him, that the Seahawks could get him. So Shanahan was quite pleased that Julio Jones is going to the AFC, and those teams like the 49ers and the NFC don't have to face him.
Okay, I noticed, I read in a lot of articles during the offseason that the organization focused on deepening its bench, so to speak, because of the injuries, all the injuries last season. And I also read some comments about fans being disappointed with the cornerback position, with the whole Richard Sherman situation. Are you hoping, and the fans, the organization are hoping the cornerbacks who are quite young, the roster of cornerbacks the Niners have now will develop sooner rather than later?
Yeah, that's probably one of the areas. That's probably the area, maybe defensive end, where the 49ers don't look, particularly strong. I mean, I think their starters are pretty good. If Jason Verrett can stay healthy, if Emmanuel Mosley can stay healthy, the cornerback situation should be good. And they did draft Ambry Thomas from the University of Michigan in the 3rd round. So they think that he can be a starter early on. But yeah, I mean, I think they're kind of taking a leap of faith, that Jason Verrett can stay healthy. And that's something he hasn't done throughout his career. Ambry Thomas, he opted out last year, so we'll see what he's capable of doing. But that is certainly a position where the 49ers go into it just, hoping that they have the right guys for that job.
And what other areas did the Niners address during the off-season?
Yeah, one of the interesting areas that they addressed was the running back position. We always kind of felt like they had pretty good depth at the running back position with Raheem Mostert, with Jeff Wilson. They brought in Wayne Gallman from the Giants, who's their leading rusher last year after Saquon Barkley got injured. So they've had, they have some players that kind of felt like they'd be in pretty good shape, including JaMychal Hasty, who's a pretty good running back too, who just saw a little bit of time last year as a rookie, and then he got injured. But I don't know that it was a big surprise that they drafted a running back, but the fact that they traded up to get a running back in the 3rd round by the name of Trey Sermon from Ohio State, the fact that then they used their final pick in the draft in the 5th round on another running back, Elijah Mitchell from the University of Louisiana. That was a little bit of a surprise, but then it turned out like, wow, they need that depth because, running backs do undergo a lot of wear and tear during the course of a season. And also during the off season, Jeff Wilson Jr. sustains a knee injury, and he's going to be out. He was 4 to 6 months, so he's going to miss some games. He'll probably be available to play the middle part of the season. So that's one area that I think they really stacked up with their depth a little bit. I think on the offensive line too, they brought in Alex Mack, who's a well-known center for many years with the Browns and the Falcons, and he's been with Kyle Shanahan in both of those stops, so he knows the system, but he's getting up there in age. They drafted a guard, Aaron Banks, who's a big guy, real big guy, who can also move and do the things that the 49ers want their offensive linemen to do. So those are two areas. But the one area that I think, I talked a little bit about that is defensive end. Nick Bosa returns from an ACL injury. Watching some of the videos of him working out, he looks pretty good. Now, he was one of the absolute best defensive ends in the league, can really rush the passer, can play the run, does everything that you want a defensive end to do. The number 2 overall pick in the 2019 draft. And man, he played great as a rookie, but game 2 of the season last year, he tears his anterior cruciate ligament, his ACL, in his left knee, and he was out for the year. And then you have Dee Ford, who's a really good player, but I just don't know that he's going to be healthy. He has this back injury that kept him out of 15 games last year. I think I don't know that he'll be healthy enough to play. Even if he is, I don't know if he'll be up to the level that the 49ers would like him to be. And even then, how long can he play? So I think those are a couple of areas where the 49ers are kind of crossing their fingers and hoping for the best. They went out and got a defensive end from the LA Rams, Samson Ebukam, who is a guy that has a lot of talent, but he hasn't put it all together. And the 49ers are hoping he can put it together, because I think that's one area, the pass rush, where they can definitely show a big improvement from last season.
So, okay, aside from those injuries, the Niners will be getting almost all of the starters from last season. You mentioned Nick Bosa, George Kittle will be back, and other players. So, other than those, practically all of the starters from last season will be back.
Yeah, no, and that's what they're expecting. Continuity, right? Guys who they know what those players bring to the table. The players know the systems. There's a new defensive coordinator with D'Amico Ryans being promoted from linebackers coach to defensive coordinator, with Robert Saleh going on to coach the New York Jets. Probably the biggest re-signing in the offseason was Trent Williams at left tackle. That's a very important position. You're protecting the blind side of the quarterback as he's throwing. He's also one of the best run blockers in the league. So, yeah, I mean, we talked about this earlier. 49ers they're set up to win right now. And that's why they don't want to take a step back and put a rookie quarterback in there who's learning his way, because the most important thing isn't to get Trey Lance ready for this season or next season or whatever. The most important thing is to win games. And if Jimmy Garoppolo is that guy, then that's who they're going with, because the rest of the roster is set up to win football games this year.
And how has Trey performed in scrimmages, in preseason games, if there are any? How has he performed?
Yeah, so they have it. The preseason starts right now. Preseason starts in August, where you put pads on and you play other teams. The 49ers will have 3 preseason games this year, like all teams in the NFL. The NFL, they moved from a 16-game regular season to a 17-game regular season. And in the past, there were 4 preseason games. This year, there are 3 preseason games. So right now, we're in not quite the middle. We're pretty much the beginning of a 40-day stretch where the players are on vacation but still working out. The coaches are on vacation. They had like 7 practices, full team, without pads. And Trey Lance looked better. Every time he stepped on the field, he looked a little bit better, learned a little bit more of the offense. So I think the team feels good about where he is and kind of what he showed as far as the development and just kind of making that jump from the college level to the pro level. So a lot will have to do, a lot will be kind of based on how he looks, how much information he retains for when the 49ers report back to camp, which is, I believe, July 27th, 28th, right around there. When they come back, if he's taken steps forward, if he's, has the playbook memorized inside and out, then he can be ready to compete for a starting job. So I think we'll know a lot more then of how he's growing and how he's developing as a quarterback.
Matt, if you could help me recall Alex Smith, who's a former Niners quarterback, retired from the Redskins, and then the organization did something for him that everybody thought was a class act. I can't remember what it is, but could you help me recall what that was?
You're talking about the 49ers?
Yes, Alex Smith.
Yes. Yeah. So, Alex Smith was, a longtime 49er. I think he played 8 years with the 49ers. And then, he lost his starting job to Colin Kaepernick. The 49ers traded him to Kansas City. And it's kind of the same thing happened in Kansas City. Patrick Mahomes came in, took his job. They traded him to Washington. And it was the first year that he played for Washington. They were winning a lot of football games, and he sustained a really bad fracture of his lower leg, and it became infected. So he had an infection along with this compound fracture, and went through 20-something surgeries and nearly lost his leg, and finally made it back after nearly 2 years and played again in a football game and was the comeback player of the year. And so when Alex Smith did retire after making it all the way back, the 49ers certainly they reached out and they congratulated him on a great career. I know that Alex is moving back to the San Francisco Bay Area. And I know the 49ers fully embrace him as one of their own. So I think you'll be seeing, Alex Smith at 49er functions and be part of that. But I think that just the amount of respect and admiration that, the 49ers organization has for him, how much the 49ers fan base has for Alex Smith. And so years after the fact, because for a few years there, people were kind of down on him and he was a bad draft pick and all this because he was the number one pick in the draft. But now I think everybody around here really appreciates the kind of person he is and the kind of player he was. So it's good to, at some point, I'm sure I'll see Alex Smith here in the Bay Area. But yes, he is moving back to the San Francisco area.
All right, back to you, Brian.
Right, thanks, Vince. Matt, I want to ask about Colin Kaepernick. I've been following him ever since that celebrated kneeling protest. Do you see him still? Do you still have? Does he have any chance of returning to the NFL?
No, quite frankly, no. I don't think he has any chance of playing in the NFL again. It's a tough one, right? He. After the 2016 season, the 49ers were going to be moving on from him as their quarterback. And it never, no team ever really showed tremendous interest in giving him the kind of contract that he would have wanted. I know the Seahawks brought him up to Seattle and Pete Carroll, the coach up there, met with him, but, they weren't going to give him much of anything, as far as a contract because they already had Russell Wilson. So, there's been all kinds of weird stuff happen, right? The NFL was going to have a kind of a workout for him. They were going to have it at the facility of the Atlanta Falcons, but, Kaepernick and his people wanted the pro day filmed and the NFL didn't want, them to film their own, pro day or their own workout. So he moved it to a park nearby. So yeah, it's kind of interesting how that all unfolded with him taking a knee. First started off him sitting on the bench during the national anthem in the preseason of 2016. He met with Nate Boyer, a former Green Beret, and he said, "Hey, how about if you kneel? It's showing more respect than just sitting." And Kaepernick made it pretty clear. It was his protest was against police brutality. It was against inequality in the United States of America. A lot of people tried to spin it for their own political, needs or wants to make it anti-American, anti-military, anti-flag, all this, kind of nonsense. Nobody really, they listened. People who tried to spin it into whatever they wanted, they listened, but they didn't want to hear it. They wanted to kind of assign what they thought it meant that would make Colin look, badly. But, he was clearly, he was a polarizing figure in the United States. He was a polarizing figure in the NFL. And now it's kind of interesting how, years have gone by, and, he is seen certainly in a different light, globally than he was back in 2016 when, he was just then, getting the message out, and, all the stuff that's happened in this country, have kind of, brought more definition to what it was that Colin Kaepernick was talking about. So he's he's kind of kept a low profile. I don't know that he's done any interviews or anything since, since his football career ended. He wanted to continue, but since it's ended, I don't think he's done much to really express his views. But a lot of people have kind of stepped up and taken that on, and he is now kind of seen as one of the real leaders, kind of a silent leader, speaking through his actions more than his words, about some very hot button topics that have really consumed the United States, especially just the racism that really started cropping up there, during 2016, and has continued to this day. It's continued to this day, and it's still remains a huge talking point here in the United States.
So, do you think there's any truth or to the insinuations that he was blackballed by the league?
Well, I don't know exactly what the definition of blackball is. If you're saying that teams communicated with each other and said, we won't sign him if you don't sign him, I don't think that happened. But I really think 32 teams individually decided we don't want him. It's not even a point of contention. It's not even a debate whether he's one of the top 64 quarterbacks in the league, which is there's 32 teams in the league, and there are, the starter and the backup. You see the same quarterbacks who are not very good players getting jobs every year, who are maybe not even starting caliber, but they're considered backup quality. Well, there's no way, Colin Kaepernick isn't one of those. One of the top 64, or certainly not, back in 2017 when he was looking for a job. I don't know what roadblocks were set out there. I don't know how difficult Colin made it on himself. I don't know if he was of the opinion, I'm either going to be a starter or nothing else. I don't know. He's never really spoken to that. I think he always felt like, I'll go somewhere and compete. But I think a lot of teams, like say the Seattle Seahawks, well, they're not going to have anybody compete with Russell Wilson. The Patriots weren't going to have anybody compete with Tom Brady. I think it run its course with the 49ers through a number of different coaches. And that wasn't going to work here. It was probably time for the organization to make a break from him. But I don't know that he was blackballed, but it's pretty clear that a lot of football teams that could have used him at the very least as a backup decided that they didn't want him. So I don't know how you want to term that, but but a lot of teams signed quarterbacks who were a lot worse than Colin Kaepernick.
Yeah, that's true. Though, well, one player who's making a comeback is Tim Tebow, although it's a different position. Do you think if there's any chance he would get some ideas from that?
No, I don't think so. I think Colin is a very, he's a very prideful guy. He wouldn't. I don't think it would even register with Kaepernick to have a position change and come back, at a tight end or some other spot. So now I really don't think that would be the case at all. And let's face it, Colin Kaepernick now is at a point in his life where, kind of his football career would be on the downside. I mean, he's 33 years old, and it's really difficult to make any kind of change like that. Heck, at this point, 33 years old, it would be difficult for him to even get back into the game as a quarterback. The thing that I think with Tim Tebow, he had Urban Meyer, the new head coach of Jacksonville, who's somebody that thinks highly of him. He won a lot of football games at the University of Florida with Tim Tebow. And I think probably the one thing that Colin Kaepernick lacks is an advocate within the NFL. There aren't NFL coaches or offensive coordinators who are fighting for Colin Kaepernick to get back in the game. There weren't those people in 2017, and there aren't those people now. So that's part of the reason why I just don't think, Colin Kaepernick will ever play another down of football in the NFL.
Okay, we're talking about Tim Tebow right now. What's your take on his return to the NFL for him after spending years in baseball?
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting topic because Tim Tebow is just kind of he's such a guy that he can't just slide into a room without being noticed, right?
Yes.
I mean, everywhere Tim Tebow goes, there's a spotlight on him. And, he wasn't a very good baseball player, but yet he continued to be on a minor league team because he's Tim Tebow and he could probably bring fans into the stadium. I mean, there's no way he earned the right to play in the minor leagues. Any other player at his age, at his skill level, would have lasted maybe a half a season and he would have been cut. And I kind of look at it the same way. I don't know if Tim Tebow is going to make the Jacksonville Jaguars. My guess is if he does, it won't be necessarily because he's one of the best players on that team. It'll be because, hey, we can sell more merchandise. We can sell Tim Tebow jerseys. It'll be, Urban Meyer. Hey, let's do a favor for, this guy, and let's bring more buzz to this organization. So, he was a great college quarterback.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he was as good a college quarterback as you can get because, he's like this power running. He threw the ball well enough, but his skills never translated to the NFL. He wasn't a good quarterback in the NFL at all because he just wasn't accurate. And unlike college where, he's playing with guys who are so much better and they're wide open. And so you can't help it complete passes to them. In the NFL, that playing field is level and you're going to have to make good throws if you're a quarterback. You're going to have to understand the game and anticipate and fit the ball into tight windows. He wasn't capable of doing that. So I almost feel like, as good of a college football player as he is, he really hasn't earned it at this level. And I have a very difficult time believing that he earned the right to make an NFL team as a tight end. So we'll see. Maybe he'll prove me wrong and have a great season. But I just think that he's at this point in his life, he's been given way too many opportunities that normal people don't get.
I guess one thing he has to prove is he's more than just a marketing and promotions guy.
Well, we'll see. You
Mm-hmm.
know, it'll be if he's selling jerseys and selling tickets to the Jaguars and creating a buzz there, and you know he's supposed to be a great guy and all that. You know, maybe they feel like you know he can be a positive influence on Trevor Lawrence and some of the other players there, and you know maybe they feel like there's a benefit to having him around, but I think it's kind of a stretch, you know, that a guy who's been out of the game for so long and hasn't ever played that position can all of a sudden at his age step in and be an NFL player. To me, it's kind of borderline circus.
All right, thanks, man. Vince,
Yep.
back to you.
If what happened to Cap didn't happen to him, you think he would have led the Niners eventually to a title?
No, I don't think so. Yeah, I think that you know the closest he got was in 2012 when he took over as a quarterback midway through the season, and let's remember he did not, you know, before he arrived on the scene, there wasn't a whole lot of quarterbacks like him. You know, there was Robert Griffin, I think, about 2 years before him, but Colin Kaepernick took that to a new level with his ability to run and to throw. But teams caught on to him, you know, and his production kind of went downhill. You know, his best year, you know, just the way he performed was, you know, the 2012 season and through the playoffs. But I think, like I said, I think it ran its course with the 49ers and the style of quarterback that Kyle Shanahan wanted, you know, wasn't like Colin Kaepernick. And I just know that from a football standpoint, you know, the new regime with Kyle Shanahan, you know, they didn't think Colin Kaepernick was a very good player, not as far as being able to run his style offense. He just didn't think that he had the accuracy, the anticipation, some of the skills that he values as a quarterback. So no, I don't think he would have, you know, I don't think he would have won, you know, the Super Bowl or anything with the 49ers. His best chance was in 2012 against the Baltimore Ravens. And, you know, 3 straight plays down at the goal line where, you know, he tried to fit the ball into Crabtree and 3 times he, you know, couldn't hook up with him. And one time there was a Delaney Walker was open. He didn't see him. So, you know, a lot of people here wonder, hey, would the 49ers have won the Super Bowl that year if Alex Smith had remained a quarterback? And, you know, that's one of those things I just don't know. I can't answer that. But I will say that I thought that Colin Kaepernick was really good that season, you know, when he took over, and just he was a dynamic player. And we hadn't seen that, you know, from anybody. I mean, heck, he ran for 180 yards in a playoff game against the Packers. When have we ever seen that? So I have a tough time thinking that the 49ers would have been better off with Alex Smith because Kaepernick was so good. But there was also a time when I think the rest of the league kind of caught up to him and kind of solved the mystery of Colin Kaepernick.
You know, not sure if it was a few months ago or early this year, there was a debate among, you know, greatest wide receiver of all time. You had Jerry Rice, Randy Moss. Many felt that, you know, Jerry Rice was being disrespected. What are your thoughts on that?
Oh, I don't think there's ever been any doubt in my mind that Jerry Rice is the all-time best. Yeah, I mean, he was just on a different level, and all you have to do is look at the numbers, right? I mean, his numbers far exceed anybody. I know Larry Fitzgerald is getting close, but Jerry Rice, with the championships he won, just the high level of play, you know, his production in the playoffs, just everything else, his work ethic, you know, he was all about football. You know, he was a perfectionist. He was the hardest working guy I've ever seen. And I just don't think there will ever be another Jerry Rice. You know, there will be guys who might be able to match some of Jerry's accomplishments for a period of, you know, 3, 4, 5, 6 years. But when you look at how long Jerry was the best. I don't know how that can ever be topped. And his drive, his determination, his work ethic, how seriously he took the job. I just don't think there's going to ever be any comparison between Jerry Rice and anybody else when it comes to playing that position.
All right, Matt. If I may put you on the spot for a while, let me paint a scenario. You're fourth and goal. Super Bowl on the line. Who would you who would you rather throw? Joe Montana or Steve Young?
Well, I'd go Joe Montana. Put it this way. If it was throwing the ball for sure, Joe Montana. His ability in the clutch. He never threw an interception in a Super Bowl. I would always go with Joe Montana throwing the ball. But if things got a little bit off kilter and you needed somebody to run or pass and keep the defense off balance, then it'd be Steve Young. But just the success of Joe Montana, he appeared in 4 Super Bowls. 49ers won 4 Super Bowls with him. He never threw an interception. But then you look at Steve Young, right, and you go, well, his one Super Bowl, he threw 6 touchdowns. So I don't think there's a wrong answer there. But I think because Joe did it first, because he won 4 Super Bowls, because he really took this organization to a level where I'm sure people in the Philippines
Yes.
wore his jersey. You go to places, you go to Italy, you go to Mexico, you go to Germany, you go anywhere. And Joe Montana, he was the guy, through the 80s into the 90s. So, yeah, I think the answer is pretty much always going to be Joe Montana.
And I'm sure you know both men personally.
I do. I know Steve a lot better than Joe, so he might not be happy that I said that answer. but Joe has this mystique to him, right? I mean, he was the guy that you talk about the Cowboys beating the 49ers in the 90s. Well, in the early part of the 70s, the Cowboys beat the 49ers a lot, sending them home for the playoffs. And the 49ers found themselves in that situation in 1981, actually it was January of 1982, where they had to beat the Cowboys to go to the Super Bowl. And Joe Montana rescued him, right? Throw the pass to Dwight Clark.
Dwight Clark, the catch.
That everybody knows as the catch, right? And I think ever since then, and then 2 weeks later, they beat the Bengals in the Super Bowl. There was another Super Bowl with the Bengals where, Joe took him down the field in the last minutes of that game and threw the touchdown pass to John Taylor. So, Joe Montana can't do anything wrong in the Bay Area. So I think if you polled 100 49er fans, 95 would pick Joe Montana to be that guy.
And I'm sure you've developed relationships and friendships with present and former players.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, I'm around the team a lot. A lot of good guys that I've covered, and a lot of good guys on this current team. Yeah, I mean, it's funny because you don't really, when they're current, I wouldn't call them friends. There's a business relationship, right? It's a professional relationship you have with them. But once the guy's career is over, oftentimes they're even more friendly. They appreciate those days of being in the spotlight and the job that we do in bringing their stories to the public. I think they appreciate the fairness and how someone such as I reports on what they're doing. And so, yeah, it's kind of interesting. There have been players where I never really felt like I had a great relationship with, but as professional. But as soon as they retire and I run into them somewhere, we kind of act like we're old friends because, in a lot of ways, they do all the hard work, right? They put their bodies on the line, but I think they know that I respect what they do, and there's a kind of a mutual understanding there, and so that's kind of been one of the fun things to see through the years is how I'm able to talk to guys who are retired and kind of keep and kind of take our relationships from maybe a professional type of thing to more of a personal friendship.
What's the best and greatest Niners game you've ever covered?
Well, two come to mind. Well, maybe three come to mind. One of them was, two of them were in the same season. The playoff game. Actually, they weren't the same season. Actually, they were one game, and I think each of 3 seasons. So in 2011 playoffs, the 49ers' first playoff game in Candlestick in a long time, Alex Smith was the quarterback. They pulled off this remarkable, amazing victory over the New Orleans Saints in the playoffs, which was just an extreme back and forth game and lead change, like 4 lead changes in the last 5 minutes of the game. It was absolutely crazy, and that place was rocking. The next year was the Super Bowl, which was a crazy game against the Ravens, where the lights go out after halftime, 49ers come roaring back, and then they lose the game late when the Ravens stop them. And then the other game was the year after that, the game we talked about, that game in Seattle. Now, 2 of those 3 games were 49ers losses, but as far as just the feeling, the excitement level of those games were great. And probably the best regular season game I ever covered was the 49ers in 2019 at the New Orleans Saints. Another amazing game where George Kittle had the 4th down catch and takes it with the guys, grabbing at his face mask. And so, I mean, there's so many games I can think of, but those are 4 that really come to mind as just, the energy, the excitement level, the back and forth nature, one of those games where, every play, it's like, the end of the world, right? So those are really some fun games to cover, and those are games I look back fondly on. So I really don't, I cover the 49ers, but I really don't get caught up in the wins and losses. I enjoy good games. I enjoy good stories. I'm not rooting for the 49ers to win. I'm certainly not rooting for them to lose. My job is to be impartial and give the fans an honest analysis and honest reporting on what happened in those games. And so, a lot of times when it's going late like that and it's coming down to the final minute, it kind of gets nerve-wracking because I have to have a story ready as soon as the game's over. So from that standpoint, it's not real fun while it's happening. Only after the fact, like the next day or later that night, then you look back on it and you go, wow, that was one heck of a good football game.
Do you, I've noticed the draft, the past several years, I noticed teams are putting more emphasis in terms of quarterbacks, putting more emphasis on athleticism, quarterbacks that can run the football like a running back, quarterbacks that can run like a gazelle. Is there a shift? Is there a shift now to that type of quarterback?
Yeah, I think so. It used to be that teams didn't want quarterbacks who could run because they felt like the risk of injury was too much. But now you see, you look around the league and you see so many young quarterbacks who are dual threats. They can run, they can pass, and it just opens things up, makes it more difficult on defenses. And so, yeah, I think there is a shift. Is it a trend? I don't know. I think you have to have a quarterback who can make plays from the pocket. You have to have a quarterback who can drop back, read a defense, deliver the ball on time with accuracy. That is a given. But the thing, if a quarterback can do that, then the running becomes just a bonus. And I really think now that with young quarterbacks, they're learning a lot more of the game at an early age with all the camps, all the throwing they're doing, the reading of defenses. So yeah, I do think you're right with that, Vince. I think there is more of an emphasis placed on a guy who can do both, because if you have a guy who can just pass, he might be right here, he might be up the kind of the spectrum. If you have a guy who can just run, maybe you have to convert him or something to another position, but there's still a use for him. But if you can have a guy who can do both, then obviously you're going to take him over that guy who can just pass and pass at a high level. So I think that's what teams are looking for. They're looking for everything. They're looking for a guy who checks all the boxes, athleticism, throwing ability, smarts, character, all those things. And so that's why you're seeing, these quarterbacks this year. That's why you're seeing 5 quarterbacks go in the top 15 in the draft, and 4 of them are really good athletes. So we'll see how those guys pan out.
Matt, I read an article somewhere in the NFL that there was a quarterback who was converted into a wide receiver. And is this does this seldom happen in the NFL, or is this a continuing trend, or is this several years from now? Is this the direction that some teams are headed, turning quarterbacks into wide receivers, or wide receivers into QBs?
I don't think you would ever see the other way, wide receiver and a QB. Quarterback is such a nuanced and difficult position that you really have to be kind of almost born into that position. You have to be a natural. But there are players at the college level who are quarterbacks who get converted to other positions. It's not common, but it's not totally rare. I mean, I'll give you an example. Back in the day, back in the 49ers' first Super Bowl team, Freddie Solomon was a wide receiver. Well, in college, he was a quarterback. So it does happen. And I'm not sure it happens any more now than it has, but it happens. And that's always something, when a lot of times at smaller colleges in particular, a guy who's playing one position because he's a great athlete, to go onto the NFL, he might be better suited to playing another position. Whether it's a linebacker who might be moved to safety, whether it's a wide receiver who could, because he's big but maybe he's not as fast, could move to tight end. So it happens, but that's something that scouting departments and NFL teams are always looking for. How can this guy help us? Might not be at this position. We really like him as a player. I don't know that he can play this position in the pros, but maybe there's another position we could use him at.
Okay, before I turn you over to Brian, a guy you're familiar with that the Niners have played against for a few years already, the Cardinals quarterback, Kyler Murray. He's a short quarterback. Is it natural, or was it natural for other teams to underestimate him for example, by blitzing him and forcing him to throw incomplete passes or turnovers because of his lack of height ceiling?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's one of the things that NFL teams look at. They want to see a guy be a certain size for whatever the position is. And for quarterback, it's kind of rare that there are quarterbacks under 6 feet tall or even 6'2". You want guys who are taller for those reasons that you talked about. I think the Arizona Cardinals, they fell in love with Kyler Murray because the head coach, Cliff Kingsbury, had known him for quite some time, back to when he was in high school. He knew what he was capable of doing. And so, the Cardinals kind of rolled the dice a little bit and took a chance on Kyler Murray because they felt like his skill set, his throwing ability, his ability to run the ball, all those things completely offset and made them feel like they were good getting him.
Okay, back to you, Brian.
Right. I'd just like to chime in again. Earlier you said that the 49ers are built to win the season. Do you think they have a chance to finally win another Super Bowl after almost 27 years?
I think they have as good a chance as any. Yeah. I mean, I think they got a really good roster. I think the Kansas City Chiefs in the AFC are very good. I think there are a number of teams in the NFC that are very good. That's the thing about the NFL. You know, with how difficult of a sport it is, and with the injuries, you know, a team that we're looking at right now, the roster, it might look completely different, you know, in December and going into the playoffs. But I think if you're a fan of the 49ers, as both you guys are, right? Yeah. I think you go into this season thinking, yeah, our team has a chance because they have a good team. You know, they have a good offense, they have a good defense, they have good special teams. I go into this season thinking the 49ers have as good a chance of winning the Super Bowl as any other team in the league. You know, there might be 5, 6, 7, 8 teams that I'd put in that same kind of category of if things go right, they can win the Super Bowl, and the 49ers are one of those teams.
Assuming they do make it to the Super Bowl, which teams do you think will be standing in their way, like the threats to the 49ers?
Yeah. Well, if they make it to the Super Bowl, Kansas City Chiefs are really good, you know, and then we'll see if they can get back to the Super Bowl a third straight year. You know, obviously Kansas City beat the 49ers. They lost to Tampa Bay. If they can get back, you know, they're going to be they're a formidable team. You know, such teams as, you know, the Pittsburgh Steelers are always in the mix. I think the Buffalo Bills this year will be really good again. And those are probably the teams that I would look at. Maybe the Baltimore Ravens. Heck, you know, the Cleveland Browns. You know, they came on good last year. The Indianapolis Colts are a team. You know, they have a first-year quarterback coming in, Carson Wentz. Mm-hmm. But I would say in the AFC is different, I think, than the NFC. I don't think there's a real favorite in the NFC. I think there are like 5 or 6 or 7 teams that could win it. I think in the AFC, it's pretty clearly the Chiefs. But if something happens to the Chiefs and they stumble a little bit, then I think you're talking about 5, 6, 7 teams that could get up there and contend. So, I mean, that's one of the great things about the NFL, you know, is it's so difficult to predict, and you just never know, you know, from week to week where these teams are going to be, and it's almost impossible at this point to project out 6 months and you know 7 months and tell you and make a really solid prediction on who's going to be standing there at the finish line when the teams play in the Super Bowl.
So earlier we talked about Tom Brady. You said that his game was limping, and then this news got out that he passed on knee surgery and he got it in the postseason. Given all that, do you think that he's going to hold true to his promise that he wants to play until, I think, 45 or 47 years old?
I think Tom Brady is one of those guys that he's going to play as long as he wants to play. You know, he's going to play. Yeah, he's engineered for this, right? He's built to be an NFL quarterback. He's taken every measure that he can possibly take to be the best that he can be, you know, with his diet, with his training habits, with just everything. He is probably the most competitive guy who's ever stepped on a field. And I want to just kind of look at his stats from last year and you know, kind of see where he ranks. But, you know, I just don't think last year was a you know, one of his better years. So, I mean, I don't want to like say that I think he's, you know, not a great quarterback, because he still is. But oh yeah, I'm looking at his stats. He had a pretty good year last year, with 40 touchdowns and 12 interceptions. But they did, you know, they lost a lot of games. You know, they lost more than you would expect. If you watched them at the end of the season, you'd be like, wow, did they just fly through the playoffs? And no, they didn't, or fly through the regular season. He's got a great supporting cast. And I tell you what, if he has a year like last year where he was only sacked 21 times, yeah, he can play a lot longer. So I don't think, I mean, he would love, I'm sure, to just continue to win Super Bowls, continue to put up, big touchdown numbers and low interceptions. And I mean, he wants to clearly set himself apart as the best quarterback who's ever played the game. I think he probably already has done that, but I think he doesn't want any debate, in 20 years, who's the best. He wants everybody to kind of agree that he was the best.
Well, actually, yeah, there's comparisons with him and LeBron James already at this point.
Yeah.
Okay, before I turn you over to Vince, one more player, Cam Newton. Ever since that MVP season, nothing's been the same for him. Do you think he's gonna get a chance to prove that with the Patriots this year?
You know what? I think Cam Newton has, he's a big guy, and he didn't turn down hits, for a lot of his career with Carolina. He would not run out of bounds. He would not slide. And I think, the injuries have kind of piled up. I just watched him last year, and he just didn't seem like he was throwing the ball at all very well. A lot's going to ride on Mac Jones. If Mac Jones is ready to take over as the starting quarterback of the Patriots, Bill Belichick will make that switch. Cam Newton at his best for a good many years with Carolina was one heck of a quarterback. But, last year, he was closer to the bottom as far as starting quarterbacks in the NFL, a lot closer to the bottom than he was to the top. So I don't know that he can ever get back to the level he was, because I just don't think he's healthy. So I think that he is probably, on his final year or two as a quarterback in the NFL.
Thanks, Matt. Vince, back to you.
All right, Matt. Last two questions before we wrap up. Okay. Number one, what's going to happen to Aaron Rodgers? Is he leaving Green Bay or is he staying? And number two, you have a lot of sources. You have a big network. Any trades, signings that we here in Manila don't know about, that's about to go down? Go ahead.
Yeah, no, Vince, I'd say at this point where we are in the calendar, everything that's happened by and large has already happened. Okay. Most of the big trades go down around the draft time. And that's why the day before the draft, the 49ers called the Green Bay Packers and said, hey, is Aaron Rodgers available on a trade? And Kyle Shanahan made that call to Matt LaFleur, the head coach of the Packers. And Matt LaFleur basically said no, and that was the end of the conversation. Aaron Rodgers' situation is tricky. He's a guy that is very stubborn. He's going to do what he wants to do, and I don't think anybody knows exactly what he wants to do. He's certainly making the Packers sweat a little bit, about where he stands. If he's going to show up for training camp, he could opt out of this season. I just don't know what that accomplishes. He had one of his best years last year. And I just don't know what he would be looking to get if he were to not report to training camp. I mean, what has he told the Packers? What does he want from them? I think he's upset that they took a quarterback in the first round of the 2020 draft, and I don't blame him. But he went out and kind of shoved it up there, it's because he played really good. I mean, he was MVP, right? I mean, he was the best player in the game last year. So we shall see. I don't know the answer to that. I don't think anybody with the Packers knows the answer to that. Probably the only person who really knows the answer to that is Aaron Rodgers. And my guess is he's probably still kind of kicking around ideas of what he can do and just how far he wants to take this.
Okay, sorry, one more, Matt. Would you have loved to see Aaron Rodgers in a Niners uniform?
Well, I mean, I don't think that's going to happen just because of...
Hypothetically.
Hypothetically, I think if I had the chance to watch Aaron Rodgers every week, I would love it. I mean, he's a dynamic quarterback. I enjoy watching him play. He's a local guy here in the Bay Area. He's from Chico, which is about 150 miles north of here, pretty close, really close to where I grew up. So yeah, I mean, anytime anytime I would have an opportunity to watch Aaron Rodgers, 100%. I don't think it's going to happen, nor do I think that that's the point right now where the 49ers should go, because, they've made this commitment to Trey Lance. But yeah, I mean, anytime Aaron Rodgers is on TV, I'm watching. And so if I had an opportunity to see him in person 17 times a season, I'll sign up for that anytime.
All right, Matt, we have a few minutes left. Any final words for our viewers?
No, well, yes, I guess. I just I appreciate anybody who's watching. The one thing that I really pride myself in is being able to reach out to fans everywhere. Not just in California, not just in San Francisco, but it's a fun sport to watch. It's it's like a great novel, right? You turn the pages, and every season is a different chapter, or you could say every book is a season where every chapter is a game, and you just never know how it's going to unfold. I mean, it's the greatest reality show on TV, and it's played across the country here. I enjoy my time covering it because of all the people I've met doing this. So I hope that your listeners, your viewers get a chance to to follow me, listen to my podcast. It's called 49ers Talk with my co-host Laura Britt. We have some fun talking about football and talking about other kind of crazy things. So we have a lot of fun doing it, and I just appreciate all the support from people like both of you. Vince, Brian, thank you for reaching out to having me on your show. I appreciate it very much, and it kind of makes me feel happy that people in the Philippines care about what I'm doing and care about what I have to say about the sport. So I want to thank both of you very much, and it's been an absolute pleasure to be on your show.
All right, Brian.
Yeah, well, likewise, Matt. It was a pleasure. I mean, rarely do I get to talk to somebody who's in the NFL. So I really got a lot of information from you, and there's actually a lot more. So maybe we can just do that privately or anywhere, discuss it without it necessarily being on the show.
All right. Well, thank you so much, and keep in touch, and maybe we'll hook up at some point down the road.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Matt, so much for your time. Thank you for joining us. And then that ends another episode of Sports for All. Thanks for joining us, everyone. So long.